All right, so we're carrying on with the way of the pilgrim. And tonight, as I promised, as you see last week, one of the places that we read, it said the old man, meaning the monk that was describing to him. Do you remember last week we saw a Christian teaching that mirrors mantra meditation exactly? It's the exact same instructions that a Swami would give to you for your practice. He says, he opened the book, found the instruction by Saint Simeon, the new theologian, and read, sit down alone and in silence, lower your head and shut your eyes, breathe out gently and imagine yourself looking into your own heart. Carry your mind, your thoughts from your heart, head to your heart. As you breathe out, say, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. Say it moving your lips gently, or simply say it in your mind. Try to put all other thoughts aside. Be calm, be patient, and repeat the process very frequently. So there we have a Christian teaching of mantra meditation, which is identical to the Hindu ideal of japam. So how's that for a little bit of a surprise? But in the next paragraph here, he tells us where he gets this information. The old man explained all this to me and illustrated its meaning. We went on reading from the Philokalia, passages from St. Gregory of Sinai, St. Callista, and St. Ignatius, and what we read from the book, the starets explained in his own words. I listened closely and with great delight, fixed it in my memory, and tried as far as possible to remember every detail. In this way, we spent the whole night together and went to matins without having slept at all. Matins happens at 7 a.m. So they spent the whole night talking about the divine and getting excited. And we're going to take a look tonight at texts on prayer by the Blessed Callistus, who was one of the people that he mentioned in that list. I was gonna read the ones from St. Augustus, but St. Augustus goes on and on and on about dogma, and I didn't want to delve into that subject. It's just not interesting to me. So, but prayer and texts on prayer is quite delightful. So I'm going to read from this book. If you've got this book and want to follow along, we're on page 271 in there. And he's got a numerological list of paragraphs on prayer. And we'll see how many we go through. There's some beautiful things in here. I read it over this afternoon as I was checking out to see which of these great church fathers we would dig into. So the Blessed Callistus, Patriarch, texts on prayer. Number 1, if you wish to pray as you ought, imitate the dulcimer player. Bending his head a little and inclining his ear to the strings, he strikes the strings skillfully and enjoys the melody he draws from their harmonious notes. All right, so this is how you pray. This is how you set yourself up to pray as you ought. So the most effective way of praying, of course, bowing your head, which is a symbol of surrender, of respect, of awe, whatever you want it to be a symbol of. You bow your head before the divine, and it's a time for enjoyment. The dulcimer player plays for his expression, the expression of his heart, and he enjoys the music, and it's an engagement, right? The man and his instrument. And so you are in this direct engagement with the divine. He goes on in number 2 here to kind of break this example down in a really beautiful way. He says, is this example clear to you? The dulcimer is the heart. So your instrument is your heart. The strings are your feelings, that mood inside. So you're playing your mood according to the heart, from the source of the heart. The hammer is remembrance of God. So a dulcimer that which strikes the feelings in the heart is the thought of God, the reminder of the presence of that divine love. The player is the mind, right? The ego self, the doer. So in prayer, we're in an active state. This kind of prayer, it leads to the before mind. It leads you out of ego, but as an act, it's an act of ego actually, because we see ourselves separate from God. We're approaching God, and we're playing the instrument of the heart in the presence of the divine. So the hammer is the remembrance of God. The player is the mind. By remembrance of God and of divine things, the mind draws holy feelings from the heart. Then ineffable sweetness fills the soul, and the mind, which is pure, is lit up by divine illumination. Okay, so this is a beautiful description of what it is to pray. Prayer and meditation are the same. Meditation is a state of prayer, right? So ideal prayer, well, we'll probably get to it. Maybe I'll let the, the teacher speak here, because prayer has a gradation. We start out where it's an act of ego of ourself conversing with this divine, who in the beginning is largely imagined. We just kind of project things we've learned from other holy folks and from scripture, and we create perhaps this entity or this concept of God in our mind, and that's where we pour out our devotion. It's later on in prayer that several things happen. One, this notion of the divine, which was initially imagination, becomes real. It manifests within us, and that prayer goes from conversation more to like an old couple having lunch together. They've been together for 75 years. There's not much else to say. Not much else to talk about, and it's not necessary. Their company, knowing that their partner is across the table, is enough. I saw, this is coming from a time when I went to New York City to the MoMA, and I had lunch in their cafe, which was very noisy and all kinds of cacophony going on around. And I looked over, and sitting at a table, absolutely silent, was this very old couple, very old couple. And they both had their right hands on the table, and just their index fingers were touching across the table. They weren't saying anything. They were just there in the midst of all of this cacophony around them. I saw them in quiet, just touching each other's finger across the table. And I thought in my mind, even at that time, I said, that's what mature prayer is. There's no action. There's no concern. There's no worry. There's nothing that's necessary to be said. You have long ago known the depths of each other. You've long ago opened your heart to the divine. And so it's just you and the thought of God, the presence of the beloved, just touching fingers across a table in a noisy world. That's mature prayer. In the end, prayer and single-minded meditation are the same. It's that constant transference of the presence of God and the surrender of self, that dialogue that's just continual and pours like honey from one container to another. So he says, is the example clear to you? The dulcimer is the heart, so your instrument is the heart. The strings are your feelings. The hammer is your remembrance of God. The player is the mind. By remembrance of God and of divine things, the mind draws holy feelings from the God-fearing heart. Then ineffable sweetness fills the soul, fills the mind, which is pure, is lit up with divine illumination, with the light of the presence, the light of God. And these are actual experiences. As prayer matures, it becomes experience. It starts out as exercise and imagination because our mind is not quiet enough to pick up the presence, because the mind is so wily and constantly throwing up interesting, sparkly things to look at. And so we have to wean ourselves off of that interest by understanding that all of that is temporary and unreal. And we retreat into this real space, this space behind the mind, behind the ego, where we can sit in communion with our divine nature, with the beloved. The dulcimer player perceives and hears nothing but the melody he enjoys, That's that single-minded focus. We're sitting there, the idea in the ideal is that we sit there in the presence, the unbroken thought of God, the undisturbed thought of God, right? Now, in the beginning, that'll be difficult, but you just keep, like Brother Lawrence teaches, you just keep bringing your mind back. Anytime you find it wandering off like a toddler in the grocery store, you just go grab its hand, bring it back over, put him back in the basket again. And so we just keep doing that. No judgment, no need to feel bad, no need to kick yourself, no need to anything, blah, 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 blah. Just bring the mind back. That's all. Being in the presence of God will make all of the changes and transformation in you that you need. You don't need to do it by yelling at yourself or calling yourself names or, punishing yourself in horrible ways, I'm sure. Don't do it. Just put your mind back on God. Keep going. Be happy. Don't worry, be happy. So the mind during active prayer descends into the depths of the heart with sobriety. All right, this sobriety means with not just not being, not having, you don't drink several gallons of wine before meditation. That's not the sobriety he's talking about, although that's also a good thing not to do. But he's talking about no intoxication with any of the senses of enjoyment, no intoxication with any of the lures of the senses of the world at all. The sobriety here that we're talking about is we have gone for the real thing, the thing that doesn't end. We're not drinking of the world anymore, which we constantly have to go back and re-drink from. You remember there's the woman at the well, that story with Jesus? He says to her, will you draw me a glass of water from the well? And she says, how can I, who's not Jewish, I'm not Jewish. How can I give you a glass of water? Isn't that impure? And he says, I'm not talking about this water. I'm talking about the water that I can give to you, from which your thirst will be eternally quenched. And she said, yes, give me this water. And so then he teaches her, right? Thakur also has a very similar story. Remember, there was a woman whose husband was an alcoholic, and he would beat her. He would get drunk and he would beat her. And so the master said, bring him here to meet me. And she said, he won't come here. He said, tell him that if he comes here, I will give him wine that will intoxicate him forever, that he will not need to take another drink of wine. And so she tells her husband that and actually gets him to come. And it happens. He becomes a devotee and he actually gives up his drinking. So this is a common ideal that we have all of the intoxicants that we need in the tavern of the heart, in this shrine to the beloved that you have within, is all that you need. It's always there. It's an oasis. It's always peace, always an unbroken silence and peace in this space in the heart. You have to find it. You have to go there. You have to remember how it was found. And you have to establish yourself there so that you don't get pulled out into the intoxication of mind anymore, right? So the mind during active prayer descends into the depths of the heart with sobriety and can no longer listen to anything but the divine, right? You just don't want anything different anymore. You find your favorite coffee flavor. I don't know. You find your favorite coffee and that's the one you want. You don't sit there and go through the tea section again. You're like, no, I want this coffee. And you go and you get that coffee because that's the one that's right. So here, this is how it is. When you've touched the dulcimer, when you've touched this divine spirit inside, when you've had that experience, nothing else is going to do it. Your old intoxicants are going to seem childish and rough, rather, not, they're messy. And they're not helpful. They're just distracting. They don't fix anything. And that's the important thing. We've talked last week in the gospel class about the fact that in the world can only do two things for you. All of your enjoyments in the world only do two things for you. They distract you, all right, which is all they can do. They don't fix your problems. You go get drunk, you have a good time, it's a great night, but you come back and when you're sober, your life's in the exact same condition it was before, except that you've gotten drunk another time. So it's not fixing your problems. The world and all of its enjoyments can merely distract you. And then the worst thing that they do is they leave a memory. Now, why is that so bad? Because that memory is going to make you want to do it again. Because it's going to be a very selective memory. What are you going to remember? You're going to remember the small bit of the experience that was actually pleasurable. And it's going to loop on that pleasure until you give in. You see, that's the nature of samskara. That's why we are careful, because the pleasures of the world are temporary, so they won't last. The intoxication, the joy, the happiness, the pleasure won't last. It will be a distraction, and it will produce a memory in the mind that will remind you that you want this and will lure you into it by only replaying the pleasurable part. It won't play the whole experience. It won't play what you said to yourself Saturday morning when you woke up after being out on a drunken binge again. That Saturday morning when you woke up late, your head was pounding, you were tired, you felt awful in your body, and you said to yourself, oh my God, I'm never going to do that again. Right? So it's your nature to never do it again. We have all told ourselves that. But the role of memory, the role of samskara, is to replay that 3-second tape of how fun it was to be drunk over and over and over again until you give in and go out again next Friday night. And you're stuck again to wake up Saturday morning and for the 400th time in your life to say, oh, I'm never going to do that again. The remedy to it is to find the real place within the heart that doesn't distract, but actually fixes your life. Doesn't distract you from your troubles, but actually points to the solutions to them, gives you an ability to change them, gives you an ability to transcend them, gives you an ability to unify your will within, so you're not always arguing with yourself, trying to do the right thing. It gives you that strength. So you can no longer listen to aught but God. All his inner being speaks to God, and with the voice of David, my soul follows hard after you. You do at that, but this is when you've set your sail. Like Thakur says, if you set the sail, sailing's easy. The hard part is setting the sail. So the hard part is getting the habit of inner prayer, the habit of meditation, the habit of going within for your joy. That's the hard part. Train to break all of your old habits that say all the things you really want to do are out in the world. You've got to through discernment. You can't renounce something until you understand the nature of something. So you have to discern what is the nature of things in the world, and you come to understand that all of them are temporary. None of them will last. They all only leave a hunger for more. And you are able then to walk away from them because you've grown up, you've sobered, you're done with the intoxication, the lies of the senses. And you sit there in the presence of the divine, and it's all that you want, and it fills you up with a bliss and a joy. And in its maturity, it fills you up with an ecstasy that allows you to actually unite with the beloved. All his inner being speaks to God. Okay, who is God? God is divine love. God is an unconditioned love. God is an infinite intelligence. So there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to enjoy. There's a lot to be absorbed into. It is a beautiful and amazing experience of union. And with the voice of David, my soul follows hard after you, which means that longing has been established now. You want nothing but the presence of God, and you will follow hard to find him, to find her, that. Number 4, if we do not bar our bodily senses, all right, here comes the hard news. If you don't bar your bodily senses, the fountain of that water which the Lord promised to the woman of Samaria, that's the woman of the well we just talked about. The water which the Lord promised to the woman of Samaria will not gush forth in us. All right, that's a promise and a statement and a warning. If you do not do the discernment necessary to transcend your body and its pleasures, just doing the growing up that's necessary to see the temporary nature of them and the fact that they just produce continual hunger for more. If you don't learn that and you don't take that to heart and decide to go for something different, something higher, you're not going to get the water that quenches your thirst forever, right? Because being in the ego self veils you, does not allow you to see God. That's why we wander around in this world not believing in God. Where is God? Where is God? Because living in the ego sense prevents us from seeing and understanding that we have never seen anything but God. That every action of our day and every thought of our mind and every word from our mouth is prayer, is an interaction with the divine. And that in the end, we in fact are that divine. So if we call God love, what is there to believe in? Who doesn't believe in love? So if you call God by one of his other names, it becomes much more easy to understand the situation. And what Vivekananda says, he says, in the old world, an atheist was a man who did not believe in God. But he said, in the new world, an atheist is a man who does not believe in himself. Right? Because you are that divine, and that divine is your power to stand up and to be a man, a woman of integrity, a man or woman of strength and of single-mindedness and purpose, a woman or a man of deep love, deep compassion, deep caring, deep forgiveness, someone who's deeply encouraging to be around. This is what happens in the presence of the beloved when you can walk away from the world of the temporary and the changing, when you've come to understand they are not of you, right? This woman, the woman of Samaria at the well that was talking to Jesus, seeking physical water, found the water of life flowing where? Within her. So the water of life, the water of what you're looking for, flows within yourself. You have to find it by vanquishing desire, by breaking out of the world of change, by only once tasting this oasis within. Once you've found it, you'll never want to leave. It will become the center of your life. It will become that one thing which knowing lets you know everything. For as the earth by nature contains water, which it pours forth as soon as an outlet is opened, so the earth of the heart by nature contains the spiritual water which gushes forth as soon as this becomes possible, like the light which our forefather Adam lost through transgression. Okay, so it's a return. What was the light that Adam lost through his transgression? Right? It was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And what is the knowledge of good and evil? It's ego. So it was the tree of ego. Because to have a knowledge of good and evil, if you're one with God, you're one without a second. There's no ego, and there's no good and evil. There's only isness. But if you, like Adam and Eve, go through the senses, look at the fruit of the tree of good and evil, look at that fruit and find it beautiful. It's the first thing that happened to Eve. She looked at it and she thought it was beautiful. That would have been fine if she'd stopped there. It probably was beautiful. Let things be beautiful. Just because something's beautiful doesn't mean you have to eat it. But the second thought she had, it looked like it would be good for food. So you see, so that was the second step she did. And then the third one, it would give her wisdom. It would make her like God. It would fulfill her. It would fulfill her purpose, herself. So that's the 3-step trap that we fall through continually, because the Garden of Eden is within you. That's where we pray. The paradise is here, right? And the way that we get tricked out of paradise is by looking through the senses at the world and finding it beautiful and not stopping there, but feeling like because it's beautiful, it's something that would be good to experience. I want to eat it. I want to make it part of my life. So you step into the imaginary world and you try and eat it, and your idea is that you're going to get something. It's going to fulfill you. It's going to make you whole. If I was rich, if I only had the right partner, if I only had the right dog, if I just had a bigger house, if I just had 2 cars, we always think that these objects in the world are going to fulfill us and give us something, but they don't. You buy that car, and after a couple of weeks, it's not a new car anymore. It's just a car. And after a couple of months, you're looking around at some of the other cars thinking, oh, look at that one. That one's really nice. It's got a bigger trunk. I need that car. And then yours starts rusting. Somebody hits it, one of the kids throws up in the back seat. And suddenly your car's like, oh, it's time for a new one. I want a new car. And so you have to go and buy a new car. So this is what happens, and this is what he's talking about, to access the Garden of Eden, to access your paradise, you have to renounce any idea that something from outside can come in and save you, can come in and give you something. You have to understand that the nature of the world is dreamlike, and that all of its fulfillment is temporary and not lasting, and is just going to increase your problems as the future comes. So if you remember that story of the Garden of Eden, which we covered in this mind class, I think it was the first class we did. There's a second tree in that garden in here. It's the tree of immortality. That part of you that is eternal. That you that is unchanging, because it is the moment. It is the moment that identifies you as you all the time, regardless of how much the body changes and regardless of how much the mind changes. It's that sense of I that never changes. It sits in eternity within, and eternity just means before the mind, because the mind contains time. The mind contains past, present, and future. Past, present, and future are not real beyond the mind. All right? So we want to go beyond the mind, go within, and get back into that garden, which, just like he says here, that we have to bar our bodily senses, right? Bar the world of the changing from ourself, because to get back into the Garden of Eden, God took a cherubim with a flaming sword to prevent Adam and Eve from getting back into paradise, lest they should eat of the tree of immortality. Now, why didn't he want them to eat of the tree of immortality? Because they were in a fallen state. They were chasing after their senses. They were identifying themselves by body mind, and because of that, they were cursed to till at the world, to till at the earth, the dust of the earth, to fulfill their desires, right? All the time. That's what's happening to you. That's why you have to go to work every day. That's why you have to work so hard every day, is because you need new cars and bigger houses and more heat and nicer clothes and longer vacations, right? As long as our desires lead us through life, we have to work our patoots off to afford them, to get them. And if God allows you to eat of the tree of immortality in that state, there's no end to that curse. You're stuck like that forever. So what is this flaming sword that you have to vanquish before you can get back in the garden? It's your desire. The flames of desire have to be quenched, have to be put out before you can enter back into the divine and take that tree of immortality, before you can know of your infinity. You have to let go. of the stories and attractions of the temporary, of the changing world. So that all lies within you. That story of the Garden of Eden is looping at this very moment. In every moment that you step into your senses and let it lead you into the world of the changing, that's your exile. You lose your inner peace. You lose a knowledge of your divine love and divine strength. You lose the knowledge of your immortality. You forget your nature, and you become a part of the changing world. And in that, you feel small. And in that, you feel naked, right? That's what Adam and Eve, the first thing they felt was fear. That said God came walking in the cool of the day. They ran and hid. So the first thing that happens when you are living in the world of the senses is you fear God. You fear this idea of this perfection, and you run and hide. You start looking into ignorance. You start seeking out ignorance. Ignorance of what? So that you can ignore this trouble you've caused, ignore this pain that you're in, ignore the suffering that you've embraced by making that wrong decision, right? So the first sign is fear. The second sign is what? Vulnerability. They saw that they were naked, right? And so they put a fig leaf on. That's what happens. When you live life in the senses, you become vulnerable. You're a small person, you're a small body. And that's what ego is always trying to fix. It's always trying to convince you, yes, no, you're great, you're super. It's going to be awesome. Look how nice you are. Look what a great guy. Look how handsome. Look how beautiful. Look at how rich. Look at how powerful. You know, and the ego wants you to stay in that fallen state. And you believe the story. Oh, if I can just get enough money for retirement, then I can enjoy my life. The lie. Don't fall for it. So this is what he's saying. This is how you find your way back to Eden. Eden is prayer. Eden is this inner shrine, this inner oasis. And it's something that you have been banished from for a very long time. And now we're learning. You can go back. You can walk in the Eden with the beloved. As physical water flows continually from its source, so this living water, gushing forth from the soul as soon as it is opened, never ceases to flow. You've got this infinite well of love that flows from an infinite source, the soul, which we all know what's the nature of the soul. The soul and God are one. You know, Atman and Atman are Atman. It's just not diluted, embodied. It hasn't identified with a set of limitations and restrictions. So the soul is that divine flow, right? And that is God, the presence of God. And it does not have a limit. You will never know the love of God completely because love is infinite. That's why Brahmananda says what? Spiritual life begins at Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Nirvikalpa Samadhi is that samadhi where you go and you don't come back. You know, you unified with God. You've given up your ego and sense of separateness. The body falls off like after 21 days of ecstasy or 12 days. I don't remember the number, somewhere in there. That body falls off. You're done. The purpose of the body has been fulfilled, right? Like an egg. Chicken doesn't hold on to the egg after it hatches from it, right? So you're not going to hold on to the body after you hatch from it, right? So that is the way the way the body drops off from divine ecstasy. And so this is within you. Here's yet another soul in yet another tradition telling you the same thing that you can read in every tradition in the world, telling you the truth that every sage will tell you. Everybody who does the work, who follows the experiment step by step, will tell you the same. People who do not do the work will tell you it's not true and it doesn't exist. Those people who do the work will touch the divine, see its reality, drink its water, and know its ecstasy, know its life. All right, so that's the challenge. Find your way into this paradise that you have, which exists before ego, before your personality, before your story of who you are, before the mind, before thought. In the silence without thought is the Garden of Eden, where knowledge, which is intuitive and ever present and spontaneous, dwells, not the knowledge of the heart that has to be retrieved and calculated and pulled. As physical water flows continually from its source, so this living water, gushing forth from the soul as soon as it is opened, never ceases to flow. Flowing in the soul of the holy man, Ignatius, it urged him to say, "There is in me no matter-loving fire feeding on matter," right? Because you know from the Bhagavad Gita that there's nothing that can be added to you and nothing that can be taken away from you. So why would you feed on the material world, which can give you nothing and can take nothing? It is nothing. So he says, there is no matter-loving fire feeding on matter, but water acts and speaks in me, right? You speak from a place of fullness, from a place of satiation, a place of contentment, where the moment is always perfect for you. You know, we talked about that in the gospel class too. How do we find that perfection? By finding our identity, right? Because not every moment is perfect for a body. It's perfect for you, an Atman, a soul, a spiritual being. It's not perfect for the mind. It's perfect for you. You are not the mind. You are the Atman, the ever free, ever pure divine self. Find out who you are, and you can have this constant contentment. You can have this constant bliss, this constant joy, which can't be conditioned. It cannot be limited. It flows infinitely within you. It is both you and your birthright. This blessed, or rather thrice blessed water, mental sobriety of the soul, is like water gushing forth from the bowels of the earth. Water flowing from the source of the stream fills the stream. The water which gushes forth in the heart and is always, as it were, moved by the Spirit, fills the whole of the inner man with divine dew and renders the outer man fiery. Right? You become a man or a woman of conviction, a man or a woman of knowledge. You're not talking about things you believe. You're not talking about things that you read. You're not talking about things that you learned. You're talking about things that you've experienced, that you've seen, tasted, touched, heard, smelled, or the sixth sense, been, those things that are in your being, right? Those are the things that you will know, and they will give you the confidence of that knowledge. And they give you the fearlessness. That's why Swamiji talks in terms of fearlessness. You know, that's the fiery outer self, the man who's fearless, the woman who's not afraid, who knows her nature. She cannot be born. She cannot die. You know, she's ever free. The only free soul in a room full of people. You know, a great deal of, you just see that. Swami Prabhutananda was a man like that. There could be a room full of 20 men talking about the big play in the World Series. They'd be all about it. There'd be noise all over that room. Swami Prabhutananda would just walk in. Immediately a hush would come over that room. That's what the presence of a man or woman who knows the divine self, who has found the oasis, has found their way back to paradise within. That's what they carry. They are their own presence. They are their own world, and it affects everyone around them, just simply by them being. That's why Ramana Maharshi can teach in silence. That's why Ramakrishna can hold a room fully enthralled, standing there motionless. It's because the water flowing out of them, the divine presence flowing through them, is so intoxicating to us that our forgotten soul will respond, cannot continue with its nonsense in their presence. This is the man or woman who has found prayer and practiced it. Purified of everything external, and having entirely mastered the senses by active virtue, the mind rests unmoving within the heart, its vision established in the center. There it receives mental illumination, like flashes of lightning. Oh my God. Do you remember reading this morning? Like flashes of lightning in the night? That's exactly what Brother Suzuki was talking about, the practice of Buddhism. The exact same ideal. Look at this. They're even using the same words. Unbelievable. Yeah, beautiful. Purified of everything external. All right, yeah, everything of the senses gone. And having entirely mastered the senses by active virtue, right? By constant discernment, by constant remembrance of the divine nature, we've mastered the senses. Our body obeys us. We're no longer in a state of obeying our body, right? In the deluded state, we think we are the body. And when the body wants something, we think we want it. We don't understand, oh, the body desires that. I can either give it to it or not. We think I want that. And then we think freedom. we get totally deluded into this. This is amazing. We get deluded into the idea that freedom means the ability to chase your desires. I'm free to drink whatever I want, eat whatever I want, do whatever I want. That's freedom. Do whatever I want. Right? Because we think that the mind and the body, which are the ones that are generating wants all the time, we think that's who we are. And we think freedom is subjugating ourselves to the will of mind and the will of body on an endless cycle that will never end. By the time you get one desire fulfilled, your body's come up with 3 more. And round it goes. We have got to break this. Freedom is to have no desire. Freedom is to be content in the moment under any condition, under any change. It's knowing that self. That is freedom. That is prayer. That is oasis. That is Eden. And it's within you. So purified of all the distractions, we've learned them. We've seen their nature. We've grown up. We've set them down. We've learned to what? To align our thought, our words, and our deeds. So we are people of conviction, people of integration. We're one. We've finally become one inside. So there it receives mental illuminations in the presence of God. That's where the transformation happens. In that solitude, not with you fighting to become this or fighting to become that or fighting to change this or imitating some holy person in this way or that way. It's not like that. Change comes from the presence. Change comes from knowing God, right? Change comes from being in this internal quiet space before ego. And there you will get mental illuminations like flashes of lightning and thus collect divine understanding. An understanding of a world outside of this dream. The world of isness, the world without time, without cause and effect, without change. Always perfect, always free, always blissful, always wise, eternal. If they hear of this, let none of the uninitiated or those who still have need of milk, those who are still trying to find happiness in the senses or in the world, if someone like that hears it, let none of them touch it. For this is something that is forbidden to touch before its time. You won't have to tell them that. And it's not your business to forbid it. Mother is taking care of everyone. But, don't trouble yourself to try and make others believe the way of what you're seeing. They will get there in their time. They may not believe it now, and you don't have to convince them of it. They may not think it's there, and you don't have to convince them of it. You love them. You care about them. In time, they will have their dinner as well. Mother is working on that continually with everyone. The attempts of those who try to obtain before its time that which comes in its own time, and who strive to force their way into the harbor of passionlessness without due preparation, are called by the fathers madness. For he who knows no letters cannot read books, right? So it's that whole thing, wanting to be a guru before you're a student. And what does that produce? It produces ego, right? And where can ego take you? My God. Look around this world and see where ego can take you. Yes, look at where ego can take. Look at Congress. Look at our politicians. I probably shouldn't say that, but anyway, I said it. But it's a good place to see what happens when ego's in charge, and ego's gotten a little bit out of hand, especially these days. You can see the ideas of separation, the ideas of self-righteousness, the ideas of smugness, the ideas of all of these horrible manifestations of ego are ripe everywhere around us. Don't be a part of that. Be a part of the solution. Find love. Find unity in love. Find that love within your own soul, pouring out unlimited, forever, with no end. Number 9. Yeah, we got some time. Number 9, movements produced in the soul by the divine spirit as a result of efforts make the heart quiet and urge it to call out constantly, Abba, Father, right? Abba, Father, Father. That was what Jesus was calling. Abba means daddy. It's the intimate call for your parent. The intimate call, daddy. So, and it's also the Abba, Father, Father, is what the cry was of Jesus the night before his crucifixion, when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. He was on his knees and he was saying to the Father, he was saying to the Father, I know what cup I have to drink, but if there's any way that this cup can pass from me, please let it pass. But if I must drink it, if I have to drink this cup, may your will be done. I surrender to it. So he was calling Abba, Father, Father, knowing what was coming the next day, And in that trust and in that love of God, he didn't find release from crucifixion. You may not find the end of pain in your life, but you will find the way to transcend the suffering caused by pain. You will find the strength to walk through your experience without suffering. Yes, the pain will be there, but the suffering will not. The quiet urge to call out constantly, Abba, Father. This is not accompanied by any imaginings, but is devoid of all images. Right? This is a world we don't normally know until the time is right. This world of no images, no particular, pure being. No limitations and restrictions, no ego, no lack, no discontentment. This is that which lies deep within us. So this is not an imagination. It's not a state of mind. It's not an arrangement of thoughts. This is devoid of all particular, devoid of all images, devoid of all attribute. But we ourselves become transformed by the dawning of divine light. That's right. The more we draw close to that inner presence of God, the more we grow in being able to see it as it is, the divine light dawns, clarity dawns, understanding dawns, knowledge dawns, devotion dawns, love dawns, strength dawns, freedom dawns. transformed by the dawning of divine light, which endows us with an image in keeping with the burning of the divine spirit. More than that, it changes and alters us by divine power. How? He alone knows. You see, many times in religion, we think we're the ones that have to go around repenting and cleaning up our mess and learning, start to imitate some divine soul, that's how it's done. It's not done that way. You can't put out all the fires in the world one at a time. It's done through transformation, and transformation is done simply by indulging in the presence of God. Indulging in the presence of the divine within you, you will be changed naturally and normally. Because what are you being changed into? Your real self. You're getting rid of the play of your ego. You're getting rid of the story that made you small and made you weak and gave you suffering. You're walking away from that story and being transformed into that which you have always been, the eternal, ever-present, unchanging self. If a mind purified by sobriety, that's constant discernment, dispassion, discrimination. If a mind purified by sobriety is not freed from everything external by constant memory of Jesus, it is easily darkened. Yeah. If you don't have this single-mindedness, this determination, it takes someone with a certain amount of strength of decision. One place Jesus says, let your yes be yes and your no be no, which means don't be a flake. And in spiritual life, it means that 10 times over. Don't be a flake. Do your practice, stick to your guns. Do it every day. Don't let yourself get tired of it. Don't think you're being nice to yourself by giving yourself a break from it. No, stick with it. If you don't have this kind of commitment to this task, you'll be trapped again. The mind is always conjuring desires and always inviting you to be a part of it, And if you don't know who you are, then you'll be whatever your mind tells you, and you'll be stuck. Equally, a man who has joined contemplation or the guarding of the mind with active practice does not refute rumors about himself, nor turn away from talk about himself, whether open or hidden. For only a soul sick with divine love for Christ follows hard after him alone, like a brother. So you just aren't concerned with things of the world. I watched a near-death experience account on YouTube last night that Greg had sent to me. And that's exactly what this guy saw. He said just in a paraphrase, he went to this place, he experienced divine love. And he tried to fumble with words to explain how no love on this planet has ever been anything like what he experienced there. And when he came back from this, when his body was brought back to life, he was having a drug overdose, incidentally. He said when he was brought back to life, he's had no interest in the things of the world ever since, because he saw that none of them could give him what he had in that experience. So he walked away from all of it through that knowledge. So this is what he's talking about. Get in there, get a taste of this divine knowledge, get a taste of this divine presence within you. That's all you'll have to do. Just get a taste of it. And the rest of your days, you'll walk after it, follow it closely, without any desire for anything different. 11, according to the prophet, be still and know. Right? Be still and know that I am God. Take me back to my childhood hymns there. So be still and know that God is. That's what he's talking about. According to the prophet, be still and know. It is possible to curb carnal passions and their upsurgings, and to become wisely still from them, even while living in the world. But to wipe them out and annihilate them is impossible. Life in the desert, however, manifestly has the power to uproot them. Right? So they're always going to be there. Thakur talks about that. He says the hankering, he's talking about lust in particular. He says that hankering remains until realization. So there's your bad news for the night. These things will continue to dance around the edges of mind. It's the nature of this world. It's the play of Maya, right? So these little hallucinations are always going to be around the edge. It's you that has to be on guard. It's you that has to discern continually so you don't forget the nature of these things, so that you don't forget the nature of them and return to them, right? Jesus in one place says it's like a dog drinking its own vomit. If after finding God, you return to the world, he says that's the equivalent of a dog returning to its vomit. There is nothing beautiful in it. There is nothing in it whatsoever that you want. So don't do that. So we know they can't all just be wiped out until realization. At realization, they're completely gone. He's saying life in the desert. He's a desert father. That's who these guys are, these early the renunciates that lived in the caves in the desert. He says that life, if you go out there in a cave and live by yourself in the desert, okay, you can probably burn all these things out completely. But as long as you remain in the world, they're going to be all around you all the time. And you have to discern constantly to keep your mind free. Number 12. Oh, I got 3 minutes. 3 minutes and 3 paragraphs. Here we go. Some living or running waters flow fast. Others are slow and calm. The former, flowing swiftly, cannot remain muddy for long. And even if at times they become slightly muddied, their movement soon clears them again. But if the flow of water changes and becomes very slow, it is easily muddied and remains largely so through its immobility. And the only way to clear it is to make it flow faster. All right, so this means staying committed to your practice, staying in the groove with the divine. Keep the mind pure. And when we say pure, we don't mean like, stay away from sex, stay away from drinking, all those little things like that. That's not the definition of purity. Purity is getting rid of me and mine. That's selfishness. Me and mine is another word for ego, because ego creates an imagined self, a small self that has a story. And that small self is always hungry. It always wants more money, more power, more pleasure, more joy, more bliss, better looks, nicer clothes, bigger cars. That self always needs and wants those things. So he's saying, beware of that. Keep yourself moving in your spiritual life. Keep yourself engaged. Don't let it become a tamasic event where you just kind of rotely sit down, knock out 150 jopams and go to the bar. Don't do that. He says the devil approaches beginners, okay? For Vedantins, the devil is what? The devil is the ego. It's ignorance. All right. Ignorance always approaches the beginners. Those who are training in virtues and those who are active with clear or unclear sounds, right? He approaches contemplatives by producing certain fantasies, at times coloring the air to resemble light, and at others producing flame-like forms in order thus to tempt us, to tempt the worker in Christ. If you wish to learn how to pray, keep your gaze fixed on the end of attention or of prayer. This end is adoration, contrition of the heart, love of neighbor. It is self-evident that lustful thoughts, whisperings of slander, hatred of one's neighbor, and similar things are opposed to it. All this is incompatible with the work of prayer. Right? So, how do you know where you are in spiritual life? You've got 2 questions to ask yourself, Swamiji says. We've mentioned them before. Anybody know what they are? Oh, are you answering, Kamala? You're not. I can't hear you.
I was saying to see whether you are becoming more selfless.
Yes.
That is one.
Uh, uh-huh.
Which one, which one is the other one? I do not know.
Yeah, the second one is, am I loving? So
Am
it's
I
a
lying?
two, it's a twofold question, Swamiji says. If you want to know how spiritual you are, ask yourself these two questions. One, to what degree and I am I unselfish? Right? So that's the negative one. What am I not? Am I unselfish? But the proactive one is like it. It's the second one. Am I loving? Not only just being unselfish, but am I actively giving, actively loving, actively caring, actively nurturing, actively encouraging others, you know? So ask yourself those two questions. And to the degree that you can say yes to them, to that degree, you're spiritual. So, look in your prayer. You want to know, is my prayer life, is anything wrong with my prayer life? Well, answer those two questions with it. Are you dragging in selfish things or unloving things into your mind as you pray? Are you thinking about selfish things or unloving things as you contemplate the divine? If so, he's telling you in that last word there, it is in direct opposition to your enlightenment, direct opposition to your freedom. So decide then and there, which one do you want? And be resolute, be strong, and go forward. All right, so that's the Philokalia and the teachings of our man, the Blessed Callistus, the Patriarch. And we'll be back to the way of the Pilgrim next week, next Thursday.